Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Christina Tony Schmidt. I'm excited to be with Audra this morning, and just a little bit about how I came to know Audra. Audra was considered kind of a client when she first came to Forge, and that she had conversations with other young breast cancer survivors through us, and through her diagnosis and time, went through our volunteer orientation this past February, where we got to know each other a little better. I've been really grateful for conversations with Audra the past few months, and just sharing about her experience and her interest in giving back to the community, especially with other young breast cancer survivors. So Audra, I would love for you to go ahead now and introduce yourself, and take some time. First, to just tell us a little bit about who you are, what your experience in life has been thus far, and what you want us to know about you starting this conversation.
Okay, hi, and thanks for giving me the time today to share a little bit about myself and my story. My name's Audra, and I am 27 now, and I moved to Birmingham about five years ago now, and it's been like the greatest experience of my life. I got involved in Church of the Highlands, and met my husband, and we just got a puppy like during this quarantine. So it's been a whole lot of fun. And I work for I previously worked as a web developer, and I'm kind of transitioned, but still work for like a marketing agency. So it's all been pretty good up in Birmingham, aside from an unknown or a surprise cancer diagnosis. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. I've got two pups, one little 10-year-old puppy named Barry, and then my little 5-month-old firecracker puppy named Ruby, who is a handful.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing. And I'm glad that you have a puppy right now. That feels like a really helpful distraction, and something exciting to entertain yourself with in this quarantine.
Yes.
Well, thinking about a surprise cancer diagnosis since your time in Birmingham, the National Cancer Institute has reported that doctors typically diagnose women with breast cancer between the age of 55 and 64. And I was wondering if you can share a little bit about your experience of that diagnosis, and what are some of the unique challenges that come with being diagnosed at an early age, specifically an age that's not in that range.
Yeah, that was a huge surprise for me, and it all started with I was going to my yearly checkups with my OBGYN, and a couple years I had reported that I kind of felt a lump, and I wasn't quite sure. I didn't really know what to look for, what to expect. So I told her about it. And the second year I told her, we decided to go ahead and get all of that testing, and so started the process of our discovery. But since that diagnosis, like, I think some of the hardest challenges was that I had only been married to my husband Josh for a year and a half at that point in time. So I feel like we were very much still in the honeymoon phase, and we were trying to like now navigate this like life altering diagnosis. For example, even just thinking about like careers, he had just then like taken a job somewhere else, like he'd verbally agreed, and then I got a diagnosis, and we had to think through that, and like he decided to put it on hold and not go forward with it because he didn't want the stress of like having to support me through a diagnosis and learn a new job at the same time. So that was like a unique challenge. I don't think that's unique to age, but it is something like in our marriage that we had to like really try to think through and like work together to find the best solution that would be best for our relationship and our family moving forward. And then we haven't even, like, we had talked about having kids, but that really wasn't on our radar for like the super short term. So we weren't like I know for others, they might have been like planning to try in the next like 6 months, a year. They may have already been trying when they got a cancer diagnosis. So that wasn't like extremely devastating for us, but it was still another conversation that we had to have about like, well, what does this mean for kids, so we decided to go through IVF to, harvest some of my eggs, and we worked with a fertility specialist on that, and that was an interesting experience in and of itself too. Luckily he had vet experience from college, so he was able to give me my multiple shots every day for IVF, it was traumatizing for me, but it was another thing where we, I guess in a way it built intimacy on a much deeper level, having to walk through all of this together. The same thing went for when I had a mastectomy, and this also probably is not super unique to young breast cancer survivors, but he was very sweet in like he would empty my drains, and I'm a big baby and I can't take pills, so he would crush up all my medications and put them in applesauce, and it was very sweet. So like I said, it was just unique that we had to build intimacy in that way in our very new marriage. And we were at a crossroads where we could either choose to let it like make our relationship or break it, so that was very interesting. And I think also one of the thoughts, that I struggle with, or a couple of the fears that I struggle with being young, is like, is there more time for recurrence in my lifetime now, since I will maybe just be like living more years. So that's a struggle. And also like wondering if, I know we harvested eggs to use in the future, but that doesn't guarantee that, my body will still be like protected or able to have kids in the future. So that's always a concern as well. But those are just some of the things that I've, had to work through and make peace with in myself, and in our family, being so young, because I was diagnosed at 26, to work through all of that.
Audra, thank you so much for sharing all of that. That offers a lot of perspective, knowing that anyone who is experiencing a diagnosis goes through a lot of things. But a lot of those questions are unique to your age. And the fact that you and Josh were only married a year and a half into that is a huge testament to your marriage and your relationship. And that really leads into the next question I have for you about what did balance look like for you during this diagnosis and treatment, in your relationships, and also in your professional relationship with your job and those types of things, knowing that you and Josh had to do a lot of different understanding about what the roles were. That really shifts, but I'd love for you to speak a little bit more on the balance that you guys struck and the balance you struck with other relationships.
Yeah. So in terms of like my professional life and that kind of balance, I knew once I was diagnosed, and I'm very, very thankful that I had this opportunity with my work, that I was able to, take disability, because I truly like couldn't focus or exert any emotional energy on anything other than like the cancer diagnosis. My mind and emotions and everything was just consumed with this, at that point in time. So I'm very thankful that I was able to dedicate all of my time and energy into healing and, making sure I came out of it like healthy and not, I guess damaged, for lack of a better word. And so re-entering work, I probably went back to work after about 6 months or so. So it was a good bit of time that I was able to like take and process and go through treatment and heal. And re-entering work was hard because that was a really hard challenge and like balance, because I went from, you know, trying to think about, or like thinking about like making peace with, you know, like, I don't know, cancer could have, or could still in the future, you know, like take my life from me, and, you know, making peace with like, you know, death. And like, as, I mean, that sounds really bad, but that is like something you have to like work through and be okay with. And so like going from thinking about such heavy things and like life, you know, altering things, to then going back to work where you're thinking about like, this client needs this, you know, for their website. That was really hard because I was just struggling with like trying to find that meaning in my job again. If this was going to consume so much of my, you know, brain space or time, like how could I find meaning in the grand scheme of things in it as well? Yeah. So that's kind of where my brain was for like the balance of everything. Yeah.
That sounds like a really hard balance to strike. Absolutely. And just like thinking about those balances, and once again, you've spoken so much about your marriage, but in general, what did support look like to you through the diagnosis, but also after your diagnosis and through treatment, and post now kind of, I know you're in hormone treatment, but post the kind of immediate treatments, and maybe you could also speak to some of the ways that you're involved in some other organizations that work with breast cancer survivors and those kind of things, finding that support and how you've been able to support others through it. Yeah.
For sure. So, I mean, initially upon diagnosis, like it was it was surprising how like much community I did have around me that was like willing to support me and like send me encouraging words, and always like encouraging me throughout, like, you know, any update that I gave, especially on social media. My work, you know, they organized, like they made these shirts that had the A team on them, and they organized like a group for like those the breast cancer run last October. So we were able to do that together. You know, and then obviously family and friends who are all like being very supportive and like just being present with me, you know, in my recovery from surgery and like through chemo. So it was like very helpful that, you know, those people would just like treat me like I'm still the same person, you know. I feel like a lot of times if, you know, people don't really understand cancer and the effects, like, you know, a stranger could like see me in public, and especially once I had lost my hair, and just label me as like a sick cancer patient. But, you know, like I was still like a person underneath that, with like personality and likes, dislikes, you know, all kinds of things. So it was nice to still have my friends around me that like knew me and could like support me through all of that. And then just, you know, to be present, check on me every now and then. Of course, we had, you know, a lot of friends who brought meals right after the surgery, which was great. And my neighbor across the street even taught me how to knit, so I was able to knit my own hats.
Nice.
Now I have the skill going forward to help support others who are going through chemo. But, you know, after that, I really wanted to make sure that everything that I went through, I didn't feel like it was wasted. So that I was able to like help others through Forge and the Breast Cancer Research Foundation of Alabama. You know, I joined the junior board of that so I could help in those events to help fund research. So we've kind of, you know, covered the two the ends of the spectrum with like research for breast cancer treatment, and then helping survivors cope with through Forge, you know, which was great. And I mean, I think that's probably been like the stuff that's like given me the most, you know, purpose through all of it. So I don't know. That's how I've been able to feel support for sure and support others.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing all of that. Something you've mentioned, just kind of like in your bio and earlier, is that you're currently on hormonal therapy. I was wondering if you can speak to like what that experience is like and how that's impacted your thoughts for the future as well, which you've also spoken a little bit on.
Yeah. So that is part of the treatment where it seems like the least scary part of the treatment in comparison with like surgery and chemo. And then I know for others, radiation. I didn't have to do radiation. So I kind of underestimated it, but even recently I've been discovering, I've been on it about a year now, and I've got like at least a 5-year sentence
Yeah.
I've got to serve. And it's because it's the most important part of my treatment for my specific type of breast cancer. But I underestimated the effects that it could have on me. And, it's not like, it's not a treatment where you can like visually look at me and see that I'm sick, like with chemo, but it has very much had sneaky effects on me that I've been discovering lately. So, for example, I've been probably for the past couple months a complete monster in terms of my moods and like irritability because of what I am convinced what it's doing to my body. So it's been like a real challenge to try to find the balance of like what works for now in my life, but also what's like protecting me for the future. And my treatment plan. So I've had to work with my doctor a lot for those things to just make sure that I'm, doing what's best for, my relationships, my life currently and in the future. We've had to like I said earlier, we weren't planning to have kids right now, but like in the next 5 years, maybe we would have wanted to, so now I've got to like think about whether I want to stop my own treatment to be able to have kids, or do I want to like finish out my treatment and then try to have kids at that point. So we've had to like think through those things and kind of determine, when we've had to just think about it more. It couldn't just be like, okay, I want to do this now. Like you can't just up and decide that, it takes a lot of planning. So I think what we've decided is we just want to probably wait out treatment and see how that goes, and maybe just in the meantime, focus on like traveling more while we don't have kids, or, make the best of it. So, but even down to decisions like what kind of car should we get, if we're going to get a new car, like, do we need something big enough for a kid or not, because we're just, if we're not going to have a kid in the next 5 years, we're not going to base our decisions around those kind of things. So, and we're for sure type A planners. So all of these have been discussions for us for sure. But, and then I think the only other thing is just, like I said earlier too, like the recurrence of, cancer is like, I always have those fears in the back of my mind. So just when those like creep up, I just have to try to like manage that, those like fear responses. Like I don't ever want to, react or respond or make decisions based on, fears, but they're very present and very real, it is a concern. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just real quick, we have a question from the audience. Would you mind sharing what hormone drug you are on with us?
I'm on tamoxifen. That's really the only option for premenopausal survivors, from what I understand. And I was recently also, with that, I had, that actually wasn't, a lot of times that will keep someone in menopause, and it didn't for me. So then they added on Lupron, a Lupron shot. And that is, I think, what kind of really made me a monster. So that's what I decided to stop taking.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that will be better.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so those are the drugs that I have been on, and will still continue to take tamoxifen for at least 4 more years. I have a countdown app on my phone. Every
That's
day
awesome.
I take it, I decrement the tally so that I can see my progress.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great coping or just like moving a method to show the progress. And I'm sure that's helpful mentally as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. And just of knowing you the past few months, I've never viewed you as a monster. And I don't think anyone will, knowing that everything you've been through. And also just finding what works for you, I think is what's hard to balance in this because it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
Well, knowing that you've been through so much, I'm curious at such a young age. I'm curious about what advice you would give someone who is newly diagnosed, regardless of their age, based on your own experiences.
I think the best advice that I could give is don't trust your emotions to determine, your outlook on your future. So like when I was first diagnosed, and I know that you're going to feel the emotions, and I think that's totally natural, but I think you just have to like take them with a grain of salt. For example, when I was diagnosed, there was like a 2-day period between being told I have cancer and being told the severity of the cancer, where I didn't know. I was in the dark. I knew I had cancer, but that's all I knew. And I was just like flooded with just all these feelings of like hopelessness. Like my life's over. I need to be making, preparations to like move on to the afterlife, whatever that is. So that was really hard. And I, now that I'm outside of it and like a little bit, through it, I can like confidently say, like you won't always feel that hopeless. Like, you will get through it. There will be better days. There will be days where you're not consumed by cancer all the time, which is how my life was for months. Just always like consumed by cancer. So that's what I would say. Like, eventually there will be days with more hope. It won't always be hopeless. So I know it's easier said than done or like put into practice. So
Yeah. No. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I don't know, hope is such a big idea, and we all experience it a little differently, and especially through different seasons of diagnosis and through life. So thank you for sharing a perspective on that broad, but really important experience. And the last question I have for you that I would like to close on, and then you please, after you answer this, share anything else you would like for us to know. But what advice or thoughts would you share with someone who has a loved one who is experiencing a diagnosis from the perspective of a survivor?
that's a really good question. I think that it's probably best for, a friend or co-survivor to like acknowledge that they have their own feelings of, maybe helplessness. Like that they have to like grieve their own feelings for that person's like diagnosis as well. And that's not something that should be placed or on the survivor, to like help them through, you know what I mean? So, that shouldn't be an additional burden for the survivor because they've already got enough things to grieve and think about, and they're weighted down with enough. So that, and then just being able to like truly empathize with the survivor and what they may be feeling, before, offering any advice or support. I know a lot of times in my own experience, I was, a lot of people had opinions on how my treatment should go based on their own beliefs. And they didn't take the time to actually understand me and where I was at with everything and what I was thinking and what I wanted. So I think empathizing and listening is probably the best first step, from a co-survivor, for a co-survivor, from their perspective. Yeah. That's probably the best advice that I have for that.
Absolutely. Audra, thank you so much for sharing all of this and just all of your experience and thoughts. As we kind of close out this recorded session and move into a conversation, is there anything else you would like to kind of close and share on, guiding us into our conversation?
I don't know. I feel like that kind of covers a lot of it. So.
Yeah,
But if there
absolutely.
are questions, I'm happy to answer them. Like, I'm an open book about it all. So
yeah. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording now.